All right. Thanks for joining me. We're getting started now. We're going to talk a little bit about the market, some of the big things. Listen, I don't want this to be a show. I don't want this to be a show just about the stock market, like another. This is what the Dow's doing. This is what the Nasdaq did, and this is what the S&P 500 did. It's gainers, losers, the current momentary news that's moving the stock market, and just a very current events about the market that you could get anywhere. Go to CNBC, Yahoo Finance. You can get that anywhere. This show is about perspective. Of course, it's about financial planning. It's about investing for the long term, portfolio construction, social security claiming. It's about 529 plans. It's about custodial accounts. It's about wills and trusts, everything under the sun that has to do with financial. That's why I call the show Be the Boss of Your Money, right? Because there's so many things to take control of. It's a pretty darn good feeling when this aspect, the financial aspect of your life, you take control of. A lot of people are intimidated by it, so they avoid things. They put things off. They put off updating the beneficiary designations on their IRAs and insurance policies. They put off getting a will, or they all kinds of things people put off because they don't know much about it, and intimidates them. And as humans, we tend to focus on the things that we have control of, that we know, that we're familiar with. And I know it's not a good thing, but I'm here to help you with that. That's what the show is really about. Thank you for staying with me. We're going to talk about some big changes. The big change now is China. Now, this isn't new. We've been talking about this for a while. The reshoring, onshoring of production, manufacturing, technology production, technology product production from China, South Korea, our ally, by the way, but of course, but we're moving things back here. It's important to have our stable production, our stable production supply lines. And we really saw the scary side of how supply chains can really mess us up, and how all along for decades with the China boom, that the United States thought no matter what, we have an economic symbiotic relationship with China. That's been deteriorating for years. I'd say it's over. But just now, it's finally exploding into the news and really hitting the stock market, especially the big tech stocks, because China, as a retaliatory move against U.S. economic sanctions against exporting sensitive technology to China, they said that anyone in government there, state government, any entity associated with the state or territory government or the central government, which includes like a lot of people in China, they're not allowed to use their iPhones for any kind of business related matters. It's a shot across the bow that says China is going to start to retaliate against American goods and brands. And what did American companies do for the last 40 years? They created a China strategy because China was our next avenue of growth. A giant population who, when I got into the business in 1990, into the securities industry, we used to say, if everybody in China could just drink one can of Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola's earnings would be huge. They'd surge. The stock would go up. Well, a lot of these things have happened, but now it looks like it's going into reverse. And China, if you think they're going to turn around and we're going to have some kind of agreement and kumbaya and say, everything's fine, let's get back to our old economic relationship, you're wrong. President Xi, who is a Xi Jinping, the premier of China, he doesn't care. He cares about his fiefdom. He's an egotistical maniac. And he is only running this country like an emperor, getting rid of people who could disagree with him, getting rid of anyone who could challenge his power, and just an awful personality trait that he has to control everything because nobody else is capable of doing anything right. And it's really just crushing our economic relationship with China. And that means all of these companies over the decades that have developed a China strategy. Because remember, we would not touch a company, we would not touch the stock of a company if the company didn't have a China strategy, because that's where their growth was. That went for Ford, for GM, for Starbucks, for Apple, everybody. But that's going into reverse. So markets are now shrinking for American companies. Not for all the companies. There are certain companies that just manufacture products that the Chinese can't replicate yet. Companies like Caterpillar, companies like Boeing. But trust me, they're on the way. China is on the way in retaliating against U.S. products, replacing them with their own products, either through copying them, mimicking them, sometimes coming up with an original thought or process or product. But I wouldn't even give the Chinese economy that much credit. That is the big thing that's driving markets. It's been around for a long time. Trump started it. Biden took it much further. And now China, who's been retaliating little by little, but not enough to be newsworthy, now they're coming out and saying, we can turn off American exports like that anytime we want. We could get rid of Starbucks. We could get rid of Apple. We could get rid of Ford and GM. We could get rid of Lincoln cars. We could do whatever we want. You want to play? They're ready to play. So now it's a question of who's more resilient, who has the greater threshold for pain. And something tells me China, an authoritarian nation, has the upper hand when it comes to the pain threshold. And that's why investors are really getting worried about this economic Cold War with China, because it's just going to get worse. Let's roll the introduction and we will go over everything for today. And here we go. Let's put that up there, put the thingy up there. That's a scroll you see. And by the way, you can't invest directly into an index, but you could invest into a security that tracks or mimics an index. Now, here's the introduction. Here's the introduction. This is going to be a good one, and then we're going to be off. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'm Mitch Goldberg. You're watching Be the Boss of Your Money. Another down day in the market. A lot of it is China worries. We have not really thought about what a economic Cold War with China would look like. We think about military. If we get into an actual war, maybe Taiwan would be the flashpoint. You know, China will take back Taiwan or attempt to, and will win, but it'll come at a substantial cost. China doesn't have a military that comes even close to ours, by the way, but they do have nukes. So nukes are kind of the equalizer for everybody. And nukes can really help compensate for a weaker military pretty quickly. Having said that, I don't think that's where we are at this point. Scary thing to think about. But an economic war with China, so far, we've been waging one, and it's been very one-sided. They're feeling the pain. We have some supply chain issues, causes some inflation. I'm not blaming all the inflation on that, but it does contribute to it. China is suffering. Their economy is really, really bad. And that's why when they opened up after the COVID shutdown, you never saw a bounce in the economy. They're overstretched, too much debt, too much reliance on construction, on real estate, not enough reliance on making their own products and having their own consumer-led market. Their economy simply was this. They became the manufacturing, the dirty part of manufacturing, the low-end manufacturing for planet Earth. But they do have a lot of people. They have, I don't know, 800 or 900 million people. And they have a really bad demographic problem. Their population is shrinking and it's irreversible because of so many old people and so few young people and such a low birth rate. When you have a lower birth rate than the death rate, your population shrinks. That's just the immutable law of math. And they don't have immigration like we do. So there's really nothing that they can do. In fact, China is extraordinarily anti-immigration. So moving along, we have not felt any substantial pinch from the economic war with China. And they've shown that they are ready to retaliate with the Apple news. So that's what's driving today's market, but this has been ongoing for years. It's just that finally China has hit their threshold for pain to the point where they're going to say, if we retaliate, it's probably not going to get much worse on us anyway, so we might as well do it. And now we're going to feel the pain. So does this create an environment where we decide to shake hands, make up, and get back together again with China in an economic relationship? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we don't have the political will. We don't have the political desire. And I think the population of the United States, Democrat or Republican, agrees on one thing. China is an adversary through and through, no matter how you slice it. And this is going to have very broad ramifications for the United States economy and for our stock market, because for the greater part of the last 40 years, we've been developing a China strategy and relying on China for future growth. Now, if we're out of China, not only do we not get that future growth, but our global market has just shrunk by a good amount. Tough position to be in. And now having a really good China strategy is all of a sudden a liability. So multinational companies could really feel the pinch. And that's your typical standard blue chip company. And of course, your large cap technology companies. So that's what's going on. And that's one of the things that has been leading the market lower, but it's really exploded into view in just since yesterday. So in the last, let's say, 24 hours. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we're just in a bad September, because September is typically a tough month for the stock market. I don't think so. And I hate to say it, but it's making my belief in hitting new stock market highs this year much tougher to cling to. And interest rates continue to go up. The Fed is expected to continue raising rates. We're expecting the Fed to maybe stop raising rates and start to cut in 2024. That view is starting to go away, making way for the new view that rates continue to march higher. The Fed continues to tighten. I don't even think that's going to help lower the. It's not going to help lower inflation, because the things that drive inflation, is not just the cost of money, which is interest rates, but we've got policies in place for infrastructure, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, which puts a ton of money into clean energy, manufacturing, and distribution. These are all pretty big job creators, and they come at a time when fiscal policy is diametrically opposed to the tightening monetary policy of the Federal Reserve. This is just a tough position to be in, and as a result, investors are rapidly losing their enthusiasm for stocks. The S&P 500 is still up about 15% on the year, but it was up close to 20%. And your large cap, mega cap stocks are actually the stocks that are giving up gains. You're still up tremendously for the year, but they're at their peaks even a month ago, they were up even a lot more. This is what's happening with the stock market. We shall see what happens, what continues. If the Fed does stop raising rates, that could help. If the Fed cuts rates, that could help. But we're not in a recession yet. So why would the Fed cut rates now? The Fed's not going to be able to tell in advance if we're going into a recession. And the reason I say that is because I have a terrible track record of being able to tell if we're going into a recession. Typically, the Fed raises rates, causes a recession, and then they cut rates. The belief has started to become that the Fed would have a soft landing, meaning raising rates, slowing the economy down, lowering inflation, but not quite pushing the economy over the cliff into a recession. But the recession fear is really front and center. Couple that with the China news, the China economic Cold War, we don't really have a recipe of, for confidence. That's what's going on with the market now. I just want you to know it doesn't mean we change our plans. It doesn't mean if you're a long-term investor, you get out of the market. It doesn't mean you should stop contributing to your 401k plan. These are all personal finance questions. And that's really a matter of between you, your investments, and what your goals are, your age, your time horizon, your pension, your Social Security, all of these things go into it. So we'll have to follow things and monitor things. Of course, if you want to take this to a one-on-one conversation with me regarding your plans, your investments, your financials, you're welcome to reach out to me. You can catch me at Client First Strategy. Slide into our DMs, send me an email, mgoldberg@Client First Strategy, and we'll talk. All right, everybody, that's it. Have a good night, and I will be back tomorrow.